What's up, basement dwellers? Uncle Danny is here, along with Dorian.
What's going on?
And today we are going to be talking about retro and what, in fact, retro really means. When it comes to retro gaming, it's really relative. It really depends on how old you were when a certain thing came out. My personal opinion, from what makes something modern to what makes something retro, just that dividing line for me is when the game console pretty much had online capabilities. That is the biggest dividing line for me. The Dreamcast, the PS2, and the Xbox would all actually be part of the modern era. And anything before that, where it's just straight plug and play and there's nothing else, no dashboards, no nothing, just you put the game in and you play it. That would be the biggest dividing line for me. When it comes to dividing retro versus modern. Now, there is a gray area for me in the 90s, that being Nintendo 64 and PlayStation, because games took, well, quite literally, a third dimension, a new depth if compared to where they came from. Before then, you had the Atari, and then you went into the 8-bit era, and then the 16-bit era, but for the most part, games were still pretty much the same when it came to how they were played. They all have that old style to them, where a lot of it is just platform games. It plays like, you know, what a stereotypical rendition of video games would look like.
I guess I'm going to have to interject with that one. When you said they took leaps and bounds, I mean, yeah, it was still side to side, but I mean, if we look at it, I mean, in like some of the RPGs, we did have a little bit of depth. We did go up and down on the screen a little bit. I mean, that's a little bit different, but it did give us that new feeling, especially with like the Final Fantasy.
You're referring to Mode 7.
Yeah.
Mode 7. And yes, in certain games there was Mode 7. For those that aren't familiar with that term, any time that you played a game where it actually kind of did give a 3D element, such as F-Zero, Final Fantasy VI in the airship, any game like that, ActRaiser had some of that Mode 7.
Mario Kart is
another perfect example. That's all Mode 7.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that does, but I'm talking about
like true 3-dimension, 360 all around.
Yeah, like Super Mario 64 and Mario Kart 64 as
so
compared
to Mario. So when you can actually physically move the camera around.
Yeah,
and see stuff.
You are literally in a 3D environment, not a more of a mock rendered 3D illusion. Because if you want to go that route, then the Atari 600 had 3D graphics as well with like Zaxxon 3D, and I don't count that.
Okay, I'll give you that then.
Because it's just a little bit different. So I guess that would be my to answer the in my personal opinion. This is not definitive. This is my own personal interpretation. Is Nintendo 64, PlayStation 1, and Sega Saturn and that kind of stuff back. I would just have to put all that as retro. Now, when you get to Dreamcast, PS2, and Xbox, that is the beginning of the modern gaming era where it really went online. Granted, those systems didn't quite so much have the online capability that today's systems do, but it was there, and that was kind of what started it. So that would be the biggest dividing line for me, is not so much the graphics or the hardware, but just the change in gaming culture, how it started to go online. That would be my definitive line. There's some gray area in there for me based upon graphics. When it comes to the newer 3D PlayStation, Nintendo 64, and the Sega Saturn, those are more like modern gaming systems than they are retro gaming systems. But it wasn't quite there yet, so that's where I'm going to draw my fine line.
You brought up a good point, and you kind of briefly touched on it before with the modern gaming and the gaming consoles. They all have something that the older ones didn't, and that's a dashboard. The PlayStation 2 technically had a little bit of a dashboard. I mean, it was very simple. It was memory card, system settings. But I mean,
the Dreamcast had one too.
Yep. I mean, so by definition, it was a dashboard. Xbox had a great dashboard. You got to choose from your music, your game, the internet browser, if you will. But yeah, I think anything with a dashboard, if you will, I would say counts as a in modern gaming. Because with the dashboard, they're giving you so many more features that my Nintendo 64 didn't have. My PlayStation 1 didn't really have. It was, like you said, you plug it in, you played it. So yeah, I would say your line, it pretty much hits it on the head. I don't know if I would still classify Nintendo 64 as retro. I mean,
yeah,
it's hard for me to do that because
it's a gray area, and parts of me don't want to call it that because it's not quite there. But I think what separates Nintendo 64 from the modern era is it still felt like something you played solo and not with multiple people unless they're still in the room with you, which is more of a retro concept compared to how gaming is today.
But I mean, if we're going to go with multiplayer with people sitting next to you, I'm going to throw Xbox in the retro format then too, because how many of you guys sat down, got 8 TVs lined up, got all of your Xboxes put together to have 16-player Halo?
Nope, that's fair. However, you could play online. There was online servers. There were online servers for Halo 2 up until 2010, I believe. So it was an actual online game. I could play with somebody from Ireland if I wanted to, whereas on Nintendo 64, I could not.
That's fair. I mean, that's one thing that I missed more than anything is being able to sit down, plug in a system, not have to wait for updates, not have to wait for installs, just plug it in, grab your buddy, start talking crap, and play GoldenEye. Or Perfect Dark. I mean, both of those were...
GoldenEye and Mario Kart 64 on the 64 were like same room multiplayer favorites.
Oh, yeah,
those
absolutely.
were my favorites. Do you prefer modern gaming versus retro when it comes to, if you had to choose one based upon that line that we've drawn, just the systems as a whole? It doesn't have to be a specific game that makes you, just on the whole. There's some modern games that I love.
Like Skyrim.
I love Skyrim. Skyrim's amazing, but I would go... I personally, if I had to choose between the two, it wouldn't even be a hard decision. I would go retro all the way. I would pick retro over modern any day of the week, even though there's some of my favorite games are modern games.
Based strictly on our line and all that, I would go retro because it's part of my childhood. It's nostalgic. The hours that I spent playing on a Super Nintendo, Sega... you can't take that away from me. It's who I am now. It helped define me as a gamer. But if we go stray away from that a little bit, I will say modern I would prefer because of, my Twitch community, your YouTube community. I mean, we're basically one big family without actually knowing each other face to face. I mean, some of us do. But the friendships that I've developed with some of my good friends playing... games like DayZ, Chairs, Matt, if you guys are watching this, you guys are some of my closest friends that I've met from playing games online. So if we're getting away from just systems alone and we're going between retro and modern gaming, I'll have to say modern, just for the friendships that I have developed over the years, gaming with them and creating this community.
Yeah, and that's very true. I totally understand that. That actually has never been a huge part of my gaming experience, and I'm in the minority there. Most people have these vast gaming groups where they've never met each other face to face in real life, but they are closer than most people, that do see each other all the time are. I mean, they were a really tight-knit group have never had met each other. Mm-hmm. I've never really been a part of that in any of the games that I've played. Any type of online games that I've played have been with people I know in real life. For me, and this might just be from where I came from, the time that when I was born, and the time that I started playing games. For me, gaming is something that I do by myself. It's just something, I shut myself off from the world, turn on whatever it is I want to play, and I play it. It's kind of my away time thing. It's my me time thing. So I've never really been the type of person to go on to gaming communities, but I know that's not the norm anymore. Honestly, that's why.
Me time gaming.
Yes, me time gaming.
Is that what the kids are calling it nowadays?
Only when you're playing Beat 'em and Eat 'em.
Oh, that game was terrible. But as far as preferences go, I still want to say retro, I mean, the amount of hours that I played playing Mega Man X, Mega Man 3, Mega Man 2, and just the amount of frustration that game has caused, and to look back and still have a smile on my face thinking about it. I mean, you can't take that away. I mean, it's wonderful stuff. Let's go with favorite retro system to start with.
Favorite retro system? NES. Hands down.
Really? Even over the Jaguar?
Well, now that you've reminded me about it's the NES. The NES is easily my favorite system, not only in retro but all around, all systems that have ever existed.
Really, the NES.
Yep.
Now, this is kind of a loaded question. Why would you put that above like a Super Nintendo or a Sega? Is it just the most that you played as a child, or
yeah? It's just
the most nostalgic.
It's a nostalgia thing for me. Super Nintendo would probably be number 2 for me. But there's more on original Nintendo that I enjoy playing than there is on Super Nintendo. There's plenty of great stuff on Super Nintendo, but not nearly as much as that I go back to as original Nintendo.
Like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Yeah, no. My biggest ones, my biggest replays are Mario 3, Castlevania. Those are like kind of like the 2 big ones for me.
Kind of like your go-tos?
Yeah, where I'm just going to put something in. If I want to punish myself and swear at the TV a lot, Ninja Gaiden.
Yeah.
I still can't beat it, but I still enjoy playing it.
You still can't beat Castlevania either.
That's true. I still can't beat Castlevania. I will one day, but I will. I just haven't.
Hey, maybe we'll do it for St. Jude's.
Maybe.
See if we can get actually through Castlevania.
I'll get to the Frankenstein monster. I can guarantee you that, but I don't know how much past that I'll be able to get. I just can't. I've tried so many times, and I don't know. I haven't been able to do it.
That's one thing I want to talk about with retro gaming too. I mean, I'm almost 30 years old, and looking back at some of these games that came out, like people say, "Oh, Dorian, what about Dark Souls? That's a hard game." You're right, it's hard, but with enough practice, I can beat it. The Turbo Tunnel in Battletoads, I've been playing for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
I could still not beat that. And to watch some people speedrun that game and get through it with no problem, hats off to you.
Yeah, I still can't beat it. I've been playing it since the day it came out. I actually went and rented it on its release day from my video store. And first 2 levels, I'm like, oh, this game's amazing. I got to the Turbo Tunnel.
This game sucks.
Oh, I was just pissed. I still can't get past it. And I'm sure with enough practice, just like Castlevania, I could. But my patience wears thin when it gets to be that insanely difficult.
But I mean, it kind of just brings me to my point, though. Like, retro games, it seems like they put a lot more pride and effort into the games. I mean, we look at modern games today. We got, what, Madden that comes out every year. Woo, your stats change. Congratulations.
Yeah, it's apples and oranges, though. There's a lot of effort that goes into Madden games, but it's just a different kind. It's, there is plenty of effort that goes into any of those games, even though it seems like they just, crap them out.
I'll give you that. I mean, I know there's a lot of effort. I mean, you got your designers, your programmers. Mm-hmm. That's a lot harder than it was on an 8-bit system. But when games from the 8-bit era, and sometimes even 4-bit era, are still harder than a new, 128-bit? No.
They're not, I don't even know what the bit rate is now. You're talking modern generation.
Yeah, with modern generations that you can blow through in a day. Look at the Call of Duties. They come out once a year. Stories are sometimes okay.
They're, at best. And sometimes it seems like there aren't stories.
Right.
You're literally just paying for some multiplayer game.
And we'll get into that here in a little bit.
Yeah.
But with all that said, I go out, I spent $60 on Call of Duty. I go home, I spend an hour to install, get all the updates, because it's launch night. Everyone wants to play it.
Mm-hmm.
I start the story. Next thing I know, I'm 3-4 hours in. Story's done.
Yep.
There's nothing hidden to look for. There's nothing like that. Mario 3, to sit down and play through the whole thing. I mean, it took us, 4.5, 5 hours?
No, it was 3 hours.
Was it 3 hours?
Yeah, it was 3 hours. Without warping.
Fair enough. I guess I'm losing track of what I'm getting at.
No,
but you know what I mean. Like, some of the retro games, I still think hold the test of time.
With Mario 3, it's replay value. Playing the game start to finish, once you're good at it, it's about 3 hours. Yeah, if you're really good at it, you can do it in less than that without warping. But the replay value of a lot of these older games, I think, now keep in mind, The ones that I'm, putting up on a pedestal are few and far between. Out of the almost 700 NES games, there's probably only about 20 that I would really actually put forth and say must play. Most of them, they're worth skipping. And that's something that, people say, oh, they don't make movies like they used to back in the day, like the golden age of movies. You're picking the best ones. There's so much crap from back then as well that nobody remembers. Mm-hmm. You just remember the good stuff. Same idea with a lot of the retro games. You're remembering the best of the best and forgetting how contaminated the 8-bit Nintendo library really was compared to a lot of modern games where most of them are okay to fairly decent. There is a much better amount of quality control. Doesn't mean there's not still crap that sneaks by, but it's considerably less compared to how it used to be in the 8 and 16-bit era.
Like you said, there's, 700 and some odd games in the NES library?
It depends on what you're counting as NES games.
Sure.
There's about 660-something if you count actual licensed games, but depending on who you're talking to, it's anywhere between 600 and 800. Because of other stuff that did get released on it that technically isn't licensed by Nintendo.
You also gotta assume with a library that big, you're gonna hit a few bad eggs here and there.
Yeah.
And you tend to forget about them. Like A Nightmare on Elm Street.
And that's not even that bad a game. The worst ones that I can think of that I own, Amagon's pretty bad, which most of you I'm sure have never heard of, because I'd never heard of it until I popped it in.
Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Yeah, that game is bad. It's not as bad once you figure out how to play it, but if you go into it blindly,
it's rough. Most kids, it was a playable game. I didn't care for it though.
I'd rather play Mario 3. It is a McDonald's version of Mario 3 that's not done as well.
Pretty much.
But yeah, no, there are some really bad ones. And
Ghostbusters
for Nintendo's pretty bad. That one actually is. Ghostbusters 2 on Nintendo's okay. It's not terrible, but it's definitely not good.
But we also, with your modern libraries, you're going to have the same thing. Like, you're going to have your great games, you'll have your mediocre games, and you'll have some games you'll be like, why? Why the hell did you just make this? Like,
I want to say the most contaminated library of modern games
PlayStation 2.
No, actually. I can think of one that, in my opinion, is worse, and that's the Nintendo Wii.
I didn't even think of that, yeah.
The Nintendo Wii, I think, has a way more contaminated library because,
there are a lot of family games, so, to say that they're contaminated is because we didn't like the game of the age.
No. I'm not talking about the fact that we didn't like them. I mean the fact that they are just badly made.
Sounds like a video we're going to have to do here pretty soon.
For some reason, there were just a lot of just straight-up bizarre games to virtually unplayable games that were on the Wii. And it was a strange system in the fact of what they let publish on that compared to other stuff that came before and after. PlayStation 2 I think it has the biggest library out of any library, so there's a lot of bad stuff on it.
PlayStation 2?
Yeah.
PlayStation 4 is sneaking up on it though.
Yeah, which is amazing that it's
4 years old and it almost has 1,000 games, and it actually has over 1,000 games in its type.
Is it that much already? Wow. That's amazing.
Last seen, and mind you, a lot of the stuff on PlayStation 4 is only in Japan because of sexual copyrights and stuff like that. Because, let's face it, we all know the Japanese culture of gaming is quite different. You'll see our Senran Kagura video about that one.
Mm-hmm.
But, with that said, there's also a lot of JRPGs that are fantastic, beautifully done, great art, great gameplay. There's such a small niche community in the U.S. that
which amazes
plays
me.
Those style games.
I think those are great games, and I'm surprised. Like, that's seriously one of my go-to. That's one of my go-to genres of gaming or JRPGs, and it just amazes me that they don't catch on as much. I get immersed and lost in those kinds of games. In fact, some of the best JRPGs I ever played were on Super Nintendo.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I will seriously waste an entire day playing them, whereas I actually, with some of these modern games that I own, after a few hours I'll get bored, but I could go for hours doing any, say Secret of Mana, Final Fantasy, just any of that, just, your classic RPGs. Love them.
Oh yeah.
Dragon Warrior.
That kind of brings us up to our next point, the pros and cons. we look at the modern libraries, and it's great. Yeah, there's so many games, but one of the biggest cons is some of these games are region exclusive. Like I was saying, with some of those JRPGs, if I want to get them, I have to order them from Japan.
Yeah.
They don't subtitle them, so I don't speak Japanese. I know Konnichiwa.
Yeah. I can count
Wasabi.
I can count to 5.
I can't even do that.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's one of the biggest cons right now is region locked games. Like when I go visit family in England, I can't bring my game. Well, some of my games I can, I should say, but like. Mm-hmm. I guess the region lock isn't a big thing anymore now. Thinking about it on the PS4, but like Xbox, they're region locked. You can't play European games here. And
I really do wish that they would just do away with region period for DVDs. It's not necessary anymore.
Agreed.
It really isn't. And honestly, I truly don't understand why it's still a thing, because I know for a fact you can make both, DVDs and games not region locked and have them work universally. I've seen it done. So I guess I'd have to dig a little deeper to figure out what the reason is, why stuff is still region locked. Even back in the day, it doesn't feel like it would be that necessary. Now I understand there's different power supplies and the TVs display differently, PAL versus NTSC, but
that could be worked around, though. There's enough workarounds.
Yeah, and I mean, there's that, but I'm just talking about being able to just play a disc on a different system. I don't believe, at least to my knowledge, that is relevant at all to either the power supply or the display module. So,
like, some of the content I can understand, though. Like,
even that, I don't see why they can't just let it fly. My God, some of the stuff that's in the stuff that I've been playing recently.
Well, I mean, look at Dead or Alive Beach Volleyball. You look through the instruction manual on a Japanese copy, it'll tell you the age of every single person. Some of them are minors. In the US version, you look through the same instruction manual, it'll tell you the age of everyone who's of legal age. If they're underage, it'll just say age unknown.
That's actually interesting. I didn't know that.
Yep. So, can you really think of any cons for retro gaming, though? I mean, we're talking about pros and cons with modern gaming, but retro gaming, I can't really think of too many cons.
Well, I mean, I guess the fact that retro gaming is limited. I mean, there's only, there are limits to what these old systems can do. I guess it depends on what you're looking for. Some of the funnest games that I play are on retro systems. I guess
Super Metroid.
Yeah. I guess a problem that comes. See, now, are we talking problems, like potential problems that could exist now, or problems with just the games as a whole? You can't play them. If you want to play a multiplayer game, you need to have people over at your house. And if you're just by yourself and you want to play a multiplayer, well, you're SOL because no one's around to play. It's not like you're going to hook it up to the internet. So, I mean, there's that. But that's a problem that exists now.
But if we're looking back, well, let's look back in the 1995 era.
Okay.
What would be some of the cons of the gaming then? I mean, besides that, we had
loading times. Loading times. In 1995, that was when they were starting to go to disc and work their way into what we consider modern, but it wasn't quite there yet. PlayStation 1 and Sega Saturn, loading times. That was a huge negative.
But we can look at that in today's standard, too.
Not like then. There's some games now that do it, but they're few and far between. Every game back then had a bad loading time. I swear, like, every game that I played, that was one thing that I didn't like going from Super Nintendo to PlayStation. That was the jump that I made. I didn't go the 64 route. I went with PlayStation, and there was one thing that drove me nuts about it was loading times.
Don't play Grand Theft Auto for Xbox One then.
Yeah,
93 seconds.
Yeah, no, there's and Skyrim's another exception. That one has.
But then
really
again, they're also
times.
loading a massive world, so you're not hitting all those other ones.
Yeah, so you instead of having your loading times like at multiple different sites, you have one big one, and then you don't have to worry about it. So I mean, there's a trade-off there. When it comes to, like, say,
memory cards, how I always would lose a memory card, or if the battery died in the memory card, and then
or
now
in
you're SOL,
or in the cartridge. Because I did lose Final Fantasy 3 at the time. It was on Super Nintendo. I lost my... I was hours into it, and I did lose my save game because sometimes you turn on the system and it would flicker. Sometimes if you do that flicker, it can corrupt your save data. That does happen. It's much more rare now to lose your save data
Now you just got to worry about the file corrupting. But
Yeah.
that's few and far between.
Yeah, and but that's a good one. I think that's a really good one when it comes to retro gaming is save batteries. Save batteries were far less reliable than save files on the hard drive or in the cloud now. I'd say there's far less chance of losing save data on modern game systems as compared to retro. That's actually a really good one, and that's especially on 8-bit Nintendo. It was really easy to lose your save data on Dragon Warrior or Legend of Zelda. If your system flashed and flickered, that could potentially be enough to corrupt your save data, and that really, oh man, if you want to have a bad day, lose
Come home
hours.
from a long day of work, get stuck in traffic for an hour, come home, you turn on your system, it flickers, and you're just praying that you didn't lose your data.
Yep. Sometimes you did, sometimes you didn't.
I got a con that actually works for both retro and modern peripherals. For instance, the Nintendo 64, you need a memory card. You need the expansion pack to play some games. If you wanted the controller to shake, you needed a rumble pack. If you want to save your game, you need a rumble pack with the save card slot. I mean, there was all those different ones. The Super Scope for the Super
Yeah, but none of those. Yeah, but the Super Scope wasn't required to play games except for pretty much the Super Scope game.
Right, but I mean, for the 64, if you wanted to save, you had to have a memory card for a lot of the games.
Yeah, that started, I'd say, kind of in that gray area transition from retro to modern is needing extra stuff like that. Because in the 8 and 16-bit era, you literally just needed your system in the game, and that was it. Anything else was more just for fun. It wasn't required.
Sure.
So,
And then for modern, I mean, and I'm going extreme modern with this one, like with VR. You need to have a good computer. Got to buy the VR headset. Got to buy the camera if it didn't come with one. Got to buy the controllers. I mean, you're racking up a massive bill there just to play a handful of games that some of them are just terrible.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I guess functionality, the modern stuff functions way better. Even back in the day, everyone remembers blowing in the cartridge and having to constantly clean the units. And that's a thing you don't really have to deal with anymore. That's one thing that actually drove me nuts back in the day playing those, is half the time it wouldn't work until you cleaned them. Yet again, you had all those stupid cleaning supplies that you have to buy for your systems and everything.
Or let alone in today's time, try and find the cleaning kits for them now, unless you just, use alcohol.
Alcohol and a Q-tip. Just don't drench it. It's fine.
And then the second one is trying to set everything up to work on modern TVs.
Well, that's
kind of a pain in the ass.
Not really, and that's also, I don't know if that's something that's really...
It's not fault of the systems, because they were current of their time.
I mean, if you're talking about, one of the cons of retro systems for today, but
that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, but I mean, back in the day, that wasn't a thing. But even then, it's really not that hard to convert RF to component. There's tons of stuff out there that does it. And it's inexpensive, so I don't think it's too big a deal. But yeah, I mean, it's not quite the simple plug and play it once was. But even most HD TVs, I believe, unless the very modern ones, most of them I've seen still have an RF adapter for your cable. So that's all you need. So it should still work on your HDMI.
I don't know. Looking back at like the Commodore with the little pins that you got to screw.
You just get an adapter. Anything that has screws on it, there's a very cheap, like seriously $2 piece that you buy. You screw that in, and it turns into a coaxial jack, and that's all you need.
Yeah.
So that's an easy fix. There were cons of the time. For instance, all you had to go on when it comes to back in the day, if you wanted to get a Nintendo game new, you didn't know if it was bad or good. You couldn't go online and check the reviews, word of mouth, and possibly Nintendo Power, and even they didn't exactly give you a very clear answer because they kind of wanted to promote all the games available for Nintendo. So they were a
little biased on it.
So yeah, that was more of the time.
But even in today's standard, I mean, we all know IGN gets paid for good reviews. It doesn't mean I still don't listen to them. I mean, I'll still take the review with a grain of salt, but I mean...
Well, you don't have to worry about IGN because there's all kinds of social media. Just go to Reddit and look up personal review. That's what I'm saying. Everyone can talk to each other online now, and you can easily find out if something's terrible or not immediately.
For me, it's a lot harder to take a personal review over a professional review Just because, like sport games, for instance, they're pretty much the same thing. That would be my review. It was the same as last year. Does that make you want to buy it? Some people will say no.
Well, you'd have your sources and everything. Plus, it's just it's easy. Like for instance, if you go on to like say, I don't know, you go on to look up a restaurant now, and they have
like Yelp reviews and stuff like
they
that.
have like a Google, Yelp, whatever. They have one star reviews just down the line. Chances are there's a reason for that. Games are the same way. If it's being met with a ton of negative criticism right off the bat, that's something you can look up now, whereas back then you had no way to look any of that up. Most of it you would just buy based upon what the box looked like and maybe a couple of the still images on the back. That was all you.
I bought games.
That's all you had to go on. And I mean, luckily I did more rent than buy. And I was only out, a couple dollars if something was terrible. I can remember a few things that I rented for the Nintendo that were just awful, and I'm glad that it was just down $2 as opposed to buying it. Who Framed Roger Rabbit? That was one that I rented. It was terrible. Let me see.
Again, terrible in our opinion, maybe not yours.
Pretty all around. Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Spelunker.
Sure.
Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Yeah.
Those three I rented from the video store, and I was really happy I didn't own them. And honestly, some of those, I don't think I ever played Spelunker again since I rented it for Nintendo. I think I own it, and I still haven't played it.
Spelunker? I'm
pretty sure I do. You're not gonna
I think I saw it on your wall over there earlier.
You're not going to be able to see it from here, but it was bad. Super Pitfall was another bad one that I rented. There's quite a few I could probably name off. But those are some of the ones that come to mind, and this was, 30 years ago, so it's not fresh in my memory.
No, I hear you. We covered a lot today. I'm just trying, as a recap, I mean, we have our definitions of modern, retro. We'd love to hear yours. Like I said before, if you can, post something down in the YouTube comments. Let us know what you would define as retro, what you define as modern.
We would love to hear your thoughts on just that dividing line, pros and cons. Post your age if you want. If not, you can say I'm between 15 and 20. I mean, whatever. It doesn't.
Yeah, you can
matter.
give us a range. It doesn't have to be a perfect age.
Yeah.
Be like, I'm in my 20s. Cool. That's all we need to know.
Yeah, it's
because we're trying to see a demographic of what people find as retro in basic groups of 10 age years.
Mm-hmm. So that is our thoughts on basically the line dividing retro and modern gaming. What's involved, kind of where the transition was, and our own personal opinions of the pros and cons of each.
Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you guys hit that like, follow, and subscribe button down below. If you could do that, it helps us out a lot, gets us out there a little bit more. You can always find me at twitch.tv/Dorian78. I haven't been on there recently just because of life and school, but I'll be back soon, and I promise you guys that. And we'll be back for our Saturday streams here soon, too.
Yep, so if you don't just log into Uncle Danny or Dorian's Twitch stream, you can also find us at basementarcadia.com. Set up your own profile and check out what we have there. So we'll see you very soon.
Have a good one, guys.